Let's begin this morning with two historic court cases involving former President Donald Trump. In Washington, the Supreme Court will consider his claim that he should be immune from prosecution for anything he did while in office. And today in New York, Trump will be in a Manhattan courtroom as a longtime friend continues to testify against him in his criminal trial there. Former president spoke about his immunity case early this morning.
We have a big case today in the Supreme Court on presidential immunity. A president has to have immunity. If you don't have immunity, you just have a ceremonial president.
Right. Well, CBS News Justice Department reporter Robert Legare is following today's unprecedented arguments. He's at the Supreme Court with more. Thanks for joining us. So let's talk about this. Explain what is at stake for Donald Trump today.
Right. Hey, thanks for having me. Good morning to you both. So right now, the former president's legal team is getting ready to argue before the Supreme Court. They filed a motion last year asking the trial judge here in Washington, D.C. to dismiss the 4 counts against him that were filed by special counsel Jack Smith tied to his post-2020 election conduct. Now, they asked the judge to dismiss those charges based on presidential immunity. This idea that as former president, the conduct that was alleged in the indictment should be shielded from criminal prosecution. That judge denied that, and he has now since appealed that matter twice. And now the Supreme Court is set to take up those arguments here today. So, for the former president, to your question, if the Supreme Court decides that the former president should be shielded from Jack Smith's prosecution, and that could spell the end for the case. But right now, 2 separate courts have ruled against the former president here. So we'll see what happens today.
Rob, I admire your focus because it's clear that there's a protester not so far away who's quite loud. But let's talk a little bit about the arguments on both sides. Presidents are protected from any sort of civil lawsuits, but as far as we know, not criminal. And it sounds a little bit like what Donald Trump is arguing for is kind of like similar protections that maybe police officers have when they're in the line of duty and may engage in behavior that, otherwise could be considered a crime. But can you talk about the arguments?
Sure. So to your point, civil immunity does apply to presidents. That happened decades ago. And so, presidents can't be sued for conduct that occurred while they were in office. Here, there's this immunity he's arguing should be applied further than that. And the argument is that if potential criminal prosecution after a president leaves office is hanging over current president's head, can't do his job or her job. But for the special counsel has argued quite the opposite. They said that the conduct that is alleged in this indictment is the exact conduct that should be allowed to be charged. And so here we have both sides with these dueling arguments. Right now, as I said before, 2 courts have sided with special counsel Jack Smith here and said that the former president shouldn't be shielded from prosecution. So we'll see what kind of questions the justices have for prosecutors today.
And, the Supreme Court usually works on its own timeline, but considering that there's a pretty big court case that's being held up pending their decision, do we have any idea when the court could decide on this?
So they could rule by the end of June. Their term ends in June, and so this is the last case that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court. They moved on an expedited timeline, not as fast as Jack Smith had originally asked them to in December, but then when the special counsel came to the Supreme Court again a few months ago, they said, can you please move on a expedited timeline, and the Supreme Court granted that request. Now, it is important to note here that the former president has pleaded not guilty to all these charges and has denied wrongdoing here. And really, this case has now, as you said, delayed his criminal prosecution here in Washington, D.C. by months. That case is on hold while we wait for a decision from the Supreme Court.
Rob Legare, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Donald Trump is in New York this morning ahead of more testimony in his criminal trial. The former president is accused of falsifying records to cover up a so-called hush money payment made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels during the 2016 election. After a day off yesterday, his longtime friend and former publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, is expected to return for his 3rd day on the stand. CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett is outside the courthouse again, following the trial for us. So, Errol, David Pecker, he's set to continue testifying for a 3rd day, probably going to face cross-examination. What have we learned so far from his testimony?
Well, Anne-Marie, the table has been set for the 12-person jury. Over the first few days of witness testimony, David Pecker essentially described a friendship and an admiration of Donald Trump that went back decades, into the late 80s. And as Donald Trump at that time continued his real estate developer career, he learned a thing or two about celebrity tabloid journalism and gossip. In fact, Pecker described it as checkbook journalism, when you could actually pay for certain scoops or stories on noteworthy people that could run in tabloids, not something actual journalists do. So by the time Donald Trump was mounting his presidential bid in 2015, Pecker actually described and spoke about a meeting in August of that year, along with Donald Trump's fixer and lawyer at the time, Michael Cohen, in which they devised a scheme to catch and kill negative stories about Donald Trump. And that's what's central to these 34 felony counts of falsified business records, because Michael Cohen, once he testifies, will explain, because he's already pleaded guilty to this, that he paid off Stormy Daniels some $130,000, and Donald Trump ultimately, after winning the White House, paid him back, but described that as legal fees. So the jury today will hear more of details that are central to the charges in this case. But he spoke as a friend, and he spoke as someone who admired Donald Trump, and we expect that he'll also discuss more of his pledge to be Trump's eyes and ears during the campaign. So a central figure in this scheme, and we expect to hear more specific details from David Pecker today.
And then what about this business of violating the gag order? I would think that we would hear from the judge pretty soon on that.
Possibly. You know, we expected to hear a decision on Tuesday before witness testimony continued. But what happened on Tuesday is that the prosecution came forward with what they said were 10 instances of Donald Trump violating Judge Juan Merchan's gag order by retweeting or posting messages that were critical of witnesses like Michael Cohen and the judge and jurors specifically. In fact, the prosecution said one juror waffled at a moment because too much pressure was placed on her from conservative cable outlets. The judge, who has 3 options: to issue a verbal warning, to institute fines per gag order violation, which would be roughly $1,000 each, or the most extreme would be to put Donald Trump behind bars for 30 days. That's not expected to happen. Judge Juan Merchan instead said he will reserve judgment, reserve his decision, but critically for the Trump team, he did get into a back and forth with Todd Blanche, that's Donald Trump's lead lawyer, where he tried to have him explain why Trump's behavior was not a violation. And in his explanation, the judge said that Mr. Blanche was losing all credibility. So not a good sign, but we could hear a decision on that at any moment.
Yeah, you don't want a judge to say that. We're going to actually dig into that back and forth in a bit, because standing right beside me is Rikki Klieman. Errol, thank you so much. For more analysis, I want to bring in CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman. All right, let us start with Pecker. He's back on the stand today. He's probably going to face cross-examination. It looks like he's a friend of Donald Trump, so I'm sure he's sitting there not wanting to be a witness for the prosecution, but that's what he ended up being.
Well, he ended up being, because he accepted an immunity deal, a non-prosecution deal with the Southern District of New York, which is the U.S. Attorney's Office, back at the time of looking at the deeds of Michael Cohen, which resulted in Michael Cohen's guilty plea. So once he decided he was a cooperator, there is no such thing as being a little bit of a cooperator. You are a cooperator for everything. There is no doubt by his demeanor, by his words from Tuesday, that certainly he cares about Donald Trump. We don't know that Donald Trump any longer cares about him. One would expect not. But at one time, David Pecker thought and wrote about the fact that Donald Trump was one of the most eligible bachelors in New York, if not America. He dated beautiful women. And David Pecker's fear was that many or any of these women at any time might decide to tell a story about Donald Trump. So that's where this began, long before we were dealing with the issue of Donald Trump running for president. Once Donald Trump decides to run for president, to use Errol's phrase and to use the court's phrase, David Pecker said, hey, I'm your friend. I'm going to be your eyes and ears. I'm going to watch out for every story that's bad about you. I'm going to make sure those don't get published. And anything that's good about you, we'll bounce those up to the front.
So then I have to ask you, what's wrong with that? I mean, he had a relationship with Pecker and the Inquirer as a celebrity businessman about town. Is there anything wrong with having that relationship as he becomes a political candidate?
No.
Okay.
And there is nothing wrong, by the way, with paying off hush money to people who are telling either a true story or a false story.
And when we say wrong, we mean illegal. It may be unethical. It could be wrong in other ways, but
it's actually really legal. It happens in cases all the time where someone will sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and they're not going to tell their story about someone, and they get money for that.
Right.
It may not feel right, but it certainly is legal.
Right.
What happened here, according to the government's thesis is that this catch and kill scheme will catch the bad story, will kill it, it won't see the light of day, that the reason the government says it's illegal was because it was done specifically to influence the 2016 election. Keep information from the public.
But is that illegal?
Well, it depends. Did it violate campaign violations? There are actually a number of legal hurdles here by the time this case gets to the jury. Factually, it just seems to be going in smooth as silk for the prosecution. But you have to remember the defense opened very forcefully by simply saying there is no crime here. And when it comes time for jury instructions many weeks from now, we're going to see how Judge Merchant decides it should look in order for a jury to convict. Do they have to find the campaign violation? What campaign violation is it? Is it that someone should have reported this? Is it that someone should have paid taxes on this? So the law of the case is far more complicated than the facts of the case.
And really quickly, let's talk about this gag order situation. Trump's attorney and the judge went back and forth. The judge wanted some sort of case law to sort of, legally validate their arguments. The attorneys were basically arguing common sense. Ultimately, the judge does say you are losing all credibility with the court. As an attorney, when you hear that, it's not a good thing. Right.
One of the real problems here, Anne-Marie, is that the juries always look to the judge as the arbiter of truth. That's the person they trust. So if this feeling of Judge Merchant carries over against Todd Blanche in court in front of the jury is going to side with the judge. That's why it's really bad.
Oh, interesting. Rikki Klieman, thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.